So, hey, good evening, Galen. Today is Valentine's Day 2018. We're on the west coast of Canada, and we have people from Australia and all over North America joining us on this call. And the topic today for Doctors Ken and Ron will be toxins and toxicity and detoxification, the whole process of, what your body is attuned to, what it isn't, how it fights toxins, and the benefits of the whole process of detoxification. Sometimes it's not very well understood. Sometimes it catches you unawares, and yet sometimes you need to welcome it. So why don't we open the discussion with you? I think Dr. Ron?
Well, that'll work. I'll start out here. I guess one of the things we want to start out with really is, what is a toxin? And it's kind of a broad subject. There's a lot of ways we can get them in our bodies. And I've got a little chart, and I don't know if you can see it, but it talks about detoxification. And back in 1989, I was at in Escondido, California, Dr. Bernard Jensen's ranch, studying iodology. Oh, we got an echo here. How's that?
It's good now, Ron.
Okay, good, good. So I was studying with Dr. Bernard Jensen, a world-renowned leader in the health industry for many, many years. He's a man who at age 19 was diagnosed with cancer, lived to be 93. So that's a very, very important thing. He knew what he was doing to reverse those conditions that allowed him to get into that situation. But one of the things that really stuck in my mind is we talk about toxins. Back then, this is like 30 years ago now, I want to read you a statistic. There were 3,000 sulfur-based drugs back then, and there were 4,000 coal tar, like coal out of the mines, coal tar-based drugs. Now, all of those are toxins. But let's just assume that we're not taking any medications. How do we get toxins in our body? Since we started this call, you probably noticed that I've breathed a few times. I'm breathing in toxins. Sometimes pretty bad toxins. Today we're out for a walk. We're walking down a busy street with cars and trucks and diesel fuel and gasoline engines driving by us. I'm breathing. We need good air. We need good oxygen in our lungs. And yet we can really have some serious problems coming into our lungs by just simply living. So that's one thing, breathing. Then we're consuming foods, or what we think are maybe foods. They're bought at the grocery store. But if you look at the label, look what is inside of those food substances. I'll be kind and call them food substances. Mostly it's a chemical soup that we're eating today. And last time we talked about, what really is food, and that's coming from nature, the way God intended it to be eaten. And if it's not coming from those sources, then it can be very toxic to our bodies. Even the breakdown of good foods can be toxic. We know that there's a lot of concern in our culture today, at least in the U.S., maybe in Canada, maybe in Australia and around the world, but we have contamination of foods with E. coli. And this happens out in the field where people are handling products, particularly leafy green things that seem to be a problem, but people are touching that. They may have not washed their hands after they did their daily business. Who knows? So we're getting those toxins in our body. So it's coming from good foods, chemically made foods, from the air we breathe, and just a whole source of ways that we can get toxins into our body. So then how do we eliminate them? And that's just a really simple, I want to give you 4 avenues of elimination. When I'm talking, I'm breathing. So respiration, our lungs, we can expel toxins out of our lungs as we can inhale them in our lungs. Then we've got the bowels, obviously. We all know about that. That's an elimination system of the body. Then we've got the kidneys. So we're urinating, we're getting rid of toxins out of the body. And then there's another one, maybe a lot of people don't even think about, and it's the largest organ of the body, our skin. So we need to perspire. Every single day, we need to eliminate about 2 pounds of waste material out of each of those 4 systems of elimination to have good health. A lot of people are not eliminating through the bowels. I know from my practice, I've had people come into me and tell me they went a whole week without a bowel movement. I had a young woman come in and she says, I only have a bowel movement once a month when I have my period. Now you think about that. You put a lot of things in your body in a week, in a month, in a day that are toxic, that are supposed to be eliminated regularly. They're not being eliminated. That becomes a toxin at the cellular level. And then we start naming symptoms, and then we start naming diseases. So toxins are a real big problem today, but we've got answers for it. So Ken, just take off on that, if you will, and maybe put a little adding to it.
Okay, well, I did a bit of research, and I have a book that I've tried to read numerous times, but I get depressed. It's called, I don't know if you can see that, it's called Legally Poisoned. And we have literally hundreds of toxins making their way into our both food and environment that have never, ever been tested. They're unlike drugs, unlike other things, they have not been tested. And they're serious toxins. And that toxic load is what weighs down our system. And when we get into detoxification, I'll go into a little bit of chatter about glutathione, which is one of your main molecules of detoxification. But I think the other thing to remember is that we're at the top of the food chain. I have to laugh when people say don't eat swordfish because they accumulate biotoxins from lower in the food chain, but we're right at the top. And a lot of these toxins are so pervasive that, for instance, the Inuit, who are at the top of their food chain, are highly toxic in some things like PCBs and other things that are what they're referred to as persistent organic pollutants. Some of these things, DDT residues, don't go away for decades and decades. So we're in a progressively more toxic world. We've seen how sugar leads to kind of a gumming up of the liver. We talked about that before with triglycerides. Your liver is the primary organ of detoxification. I agree with Ron about the skin and certainly about the lungs. And if you've got a gummed up liver, you've got a gummed up filter, detoxifier. And those toxins are circulating throughout their body. Now, the main storage for toxins is in fat, of course. And because we're dealing with a lot of people that would like to lose fat, it gets in the way. And I had an experience that I'll talk about with a patient today. But we have to remember that there are other toxic storage dumps that are organs in the body that are high in fat or lipids. And those include the brain, the adrenal glands, breasts. So this is where we put our toxins. The woman that I had today stopped taking Emulin because she was gaining weight. And one of the problems was, I believe, she was losing fat, liberating toxins, and then retaining water to dilute those toxins because she had no mechanism to get rid of them. And so detoxification gets kind of complicated. I'll just go through a few residues and then throw it back to you, Ron. We've got DDT, we got PBDE, which is in fire retardants, highly toxic stuff. And by law, some of our furniture has to have it in them. We've got PCBs, which are used for industrial insulation and cooling. We've got MTBE, which is in gasoline additives. So when you're sitting at a traffic light, you're inhaling that stuff. We have toxins that are what are called obesogens, which is they make people fatter. And One of them is called TBT, tributyl tin. That's used in arena and hospital floors to disinfect them. It's used in sports jerseys. It's used, they all boost fat cell production. We've got atrazine, which is used in pesticides. We've got phthalates, which are in PVC pipe. We've got BPA, which is in bottles. And when you get your BPA-free bottle, they may not have told you that it's got BPC or D in it, which is a cousin of BPA, which is no better. Perfluorinated PFOAs in the non-stick cookware. Yeah.
There was a weird thing there that something else showed up on the screen. I hope the rest of you didn't see it, but now you can continue. Hopefully this will be fine. Sorry.
Yep. And PFCs, perfluorinated compounds. And then we have the heavy metals, right? So we have lead, mercury, aluminum, cadmium, arsenic. If you scrub your stainless steel cookware, you're stirring up cadmium. We have radiation, we have pesticide and pesticide residues. So there's a lot of toxins out there, and we have to deal with them. And so do you have anything to add to that, Ron?
Well, just the fact that we're getting those, I think what it's bringing us to really is the point of how do we get rid of them in an efficient way.
Yep.
You know, and I always say, you know, drink plenty of water, number one. And I mean pure water. And Ken and I talked about that last time, and I think a Berkey filter is a good way to get good, clean, pure water into your system to flush out those toxins. Because if, for instance, and this is a big issue with a lot of people, and that's a plugged up colon. In fact, I've got a book, one of my favorite books by Dr. Bernard Jensen, and it's called Tissue Cleansing Through Bowel Management. And he autographed it for me. And the autograph, it says, "Come clean, be healthy." So it's very apropos that we eliminate. Because if we've got systems that are taking in the toxins, and we all do, whether we're breathing it in, we're ingesting it through our foods, or through our skin by, boy, and that guy could take off on that alone, putting it on the skin. And excuse me, ladies, but a lot of you are putting out a lot of toxins to make you look good on the outside. That's the skin is absorbing into your system toxins you don't even know. And there's companies out there that have some good toxin-free skincare. But boy, look at skincare, look at shampoos, look at anything you put on your body, because it's a way to absorb. We don't even think about. We put on lipstick. I don't. Women do. We put on things for moisturizing on our lips, chapstick, those type of things. What's in them? We need to start looking at labels. We need to start reading what we're putting on our bodies and in our bodies. So back to the elimination. If we're getting all those toxins in our body, we need to get them out of our body before they get absorbed into the cellular level. That's a very important thing to know. So we got to drink a lot of water. A lot of people don't do that. And if you get like the lady I had who had a bowel movement once a month when she got her period, she's producing estrogen like crazy throughout the month, and estrogen can be cancer causing. So we got all those hormones that are going on in the body that are being stored in the fat tissue, and then we have a breast cancer, or we may have an ovarian tumor, or any other female organ tumor, all caused by improper elimination. So it's very critical that we get that system of elimination working right, and that's drinking plenty of water, number one. But we got to go back upstream and say, okay, let's address what we're putting in and on our bodies. Because if we're doing all those things, you can still eliminate, you're still going to have the problem. So it's a really hand in glove kind of thing. You need to do both at the same time.
Yeah, I agree. Now, I went through some of the liver detoxification mechanisms. And the liver has basically, and it's your big detoxifying organ besides the lungs. It has two primary ways. They're called phase 1 and 2. Phase 1 uses some enzymes called cytochrome enzymes, and they attack things like caffeine, alcohol, dioxins, saturated fats, on and on, paint fumes, exhaust fumes, drugs, things like that. And in doing so, they do detoxify you, but they produce a massive amount of free radicals. So in the process of detoxifying yourself, you create free radicals. And for those who don't know what that is, it's an unbound electron. And that electron is very uncomfortable all by itself. So it will go anywhere and knock an electron off another molecule and take its place. And so then it's created another free radical. So it's a kind of a pinball thing of tissue damage. So you have a cascade of damage from free radicals. And that is a big part of the aging process, is free radical damage. So that's a really important one. Now, phase 2 liver detoxification, the primary molecule of that is called glutathione. It's made of 3 amino acids, glycine, glutamate, and cysteine. Cysteine is what is called the rate-limiting molecule for production of glutathione. So you can only make as much glutathione as you have cysteine. It would be a bit like Galen saying, well, we're short on chlorogenic acid, so we can't make any amylin right now. That would be the rate-limiting ingredient, right? So getting cysteine is the challenge. The problem is that if we eat it, we break it down, and it's excellent nutrition, but we don't get it in a form that we can make glutathione with. Glutathione serves 3 roles in the body. It is a detoxifier. It makes all those chemicals, the heavy metals and the petroleum distillates and things like that, water soluble. Otherwise, they get locked in. You can't, as much water as you drink, you cannot eliminate them. So you have to bond them with glutathione, and there's a couple of other molecules that you can bond them with that then they'll go out in your fecal material. Excuse me. So getting enough cysteine to make glutathione is important. There's some supplements that promise to raise that. Some do, some don't. Some are better, some are worse. I go into that in a couple of minutes. Well, I could go into that now. N-acetylcysteine is something that they would inject in the hospital. Remember that alcohol is toxic. Tylenol is toxic. If you combine them together, it's double toxic. I had a relative of a patient commit accidental suicide that way. He'd broken up with his girlfriend, decided to get drunk, and in the midst of his drunkenness, he decided to commit suicide. So he swallowed a bunch of Tylenol. Then as he sobered up, he realized that he made a horrible mistake, went to the hospital, and of course their first line of defense is to inject that patient with something called N-acetylcysteine to assist in raising glutathione levels. But he was at a point where they had to say to him, we cannot help. Make your plans because you won't be alive more than a few more days. So that's toxicity at its worst. Taking glutathione orally does not work. You break it down. It's like having a car and putting it through one of those car crushers. It's still a car, but you can't drive it. Glutathione in a supplement is not going to work in your body. The amino acid methionine is very useful, but the problem with that is it raises homocysteine levels, which we know is a marker for inflammation. Melatonin is good to raise brain glutathione, which is something, melatonin is a good supplement. Excuse me. Lipoic acid, we've heard of alpha lipoic acid. There's something else called milk thistle, or I always have trouble, silymarin. That helps to raise glutathione. Some whey proteins do it. There's one specific bioactive whey protein called Immunocal that has got the research, and in fact, it's got patents for the treatment of cancer and AIDS. I've been eating that for 10 years. And I credit that for some of the great results on amylin that I've had because they work together. There's another manufacturer of something called liposomal cysteine, where they surround the cysteine molecule with a globule of fat, and that way it bypasses the gut, does not get broken down, and helps make glutathione. Also vitamins B1, B2, B6, B12, folic acid. And, Ron, you'll like this, cruciferous vegetables, right? That's your arugula, bok choy, broccoli. Broccoli sprouts are magic. If you can get into broccoli, I try to eat a box of them a week. Talk about anti-cancer. cauliflower, collards, kale, mustard, mustard greens, radish, turnip, watercress. So that's a too fast primer on glutathione detoxification. Your lungs are very high in glutathione as well. So managing those levels is quite important, and reducing the toxins in your environment, as you said, Ron.
Yeah, exactly. Wanted to talk about another part of how we wind up getting.
Excuse me. Hey, we've got John Turner sharing his screen. John, would you please stop sharing your screen at the top? Thanks. Go ahead.
Yeah, we can become toxic by eating good foods too. And we just talked about some good foods like broccoli. Dairy products can be very good. Egg is a perfect protein, but it's the #1 allergen. I used to do a lot of, when I was in my practice, food allergy testing, and it was done not with the old-fashioned scratch test, but blood work. And they would check to see what food you're allergic to. The #1, top of the list, was eggs. And do you know that a majority of the injections that you get are eggs based? So we're seeing kids developing a lot of allergies. So there's eggs are #1, wheat is #2, white potatoes, cow's milk, cheese, those are really, really high on the list. And I've had people come in and they had terrible migraine headaches for years. We did the food allergy test, we got the results back, and one of the highest things she had a reaction to was bananas. She stopped eating bananas, her migraine headaches disappeared. So what we're eating, what we think is good foods, may be very, very toxic to us. And I've done a lot of food allergy testing. In fact, I tested myself because I was having a lot of respiratory issues, a lot of mucus forming things happening in my body, always being sick. And I found out of 110 foods, I was allergic to 98.
Ooh.
So that made it real challenging for Donna, my lovely bride of nearly 55 years, to feed me and to feed me well. There was a few things. Now, I was at that time thinking vegetarianism might be a real good thing. So I had eliminated beef, which I was highly allergic to, I found out. But I also found out I was highly allergic to soy. And a lot of people who go vegetarian are using soy-based proteins, thinking they're really doing a good thing. But as we talked about last week, soy is one of the most genetically modified foods on the planet. So we got a double whammy and triple whammy in some cases with all of these things. So and then to get back to eliminating those food allergies, you need to put them on you put what you're not allergic to on a 4-day rotation. If you got 12 basic foods that you can only eat once every 4 days, I was pretty limited in what I could eat. Fortunately, sardines was one that I was not allergic to. So Donna got very creative in how to use sardines. And fortunately, I happen to like sardines coming from European background, the Dutch. There's a lot of sardines out there. So I was a pretty happy camper. But today, I can have all of those foods and not have a problem. Because if you have those issues going on, it causes a toxic reaction to the cells, and it goes back to the small intestine. Because in that small intestine, there's these little 64th of an inch long villi that are covered with a single cell layer, the epithelia, that sees that allergen as a toxin. And it goes in there and it destroys those cells. So then we have these toxins and poisons just pouring into our bloodstream, causing these autoimmune reactions in our bodies. Not a good thing. So we got to go back and we need to heal the gut. First, we got to remove the toxins. We got to find out what those are. And if you're having any of those issues, go find somebody that can do that kind of testing, because it's really, really good. I work with a lab down in North Carolina, and they do some really good work. You have a person come in, a lab person, they do some blood draw, and you get a report back. And one guy, oh man, I just cried when I got his report back, and I had to talk to him. I said, basically, you can't eat, man. He has since passed away too. He had some real serious problems, but it all stems back, in my opinion, to the gut. We got to heal the gut, because that's where the absorption of nutrients occurs to the largest extent. And if we're getting in toxins, then we're overburdening our elimination systems more than they can handle, and then we get diseases. And it's really a serious problem. So, you know, if you can find somebody that can do that kind of work for you, if you got some major challenge, it's a good way to go.
One thing that sprung to my mind as soon as you talked about egg, and you touched on it, is that a lot of both vaccinations, immunizations, injections use albumin as a carrier.
Exactly.
And it's one thing to put egg in your stomach. It's another thing to put egg in your bloodstream. Big difference. The body is very sensitive to what goes into the bloodstream. The stomach and digestive system, when it's healthy and you've got acid, you take care of that thing. So I think a lot of injections are sensitizing people to eggs. And that's a concern. One of the things that I thought I might mention is also what not to do. I've had people who do flushes and things like that. Now, there are ways to detoxify a sort of an aggressive detoxification, but some of them do harm. So you have to be careful with what you do. And Ron would agree with this. Your colon is about as thick as your eyelid. It's not a big sewer pipe. And you got to be pretty nice to that, so you don't get aggressive with the colon, or the intestines for that matter. There is a flush that goes olive oil, Epsom salts, lemon juice. And I have patients come back and say, well, gee, I passed about 30 gallstones. And I say, are they waxy beads that seem to float in the toilet? And they say, yeah, how did you know? And I said, well, you made soap. When you take oil and acid and put it in the presence of a strong base, which is bile, you make soap. That's saponification. And the Epsom salts makes the gallbladder squeeze. Now, if you've got a big spiky gallstone in that gallbladder and it gives a big squeeze and lodges in the bile duct, you're an emergency case. So I'm not a big fan of those. Ron, have you dealt with Metagenics?
Yes.
Yeah, they have a clear change program, which is a really good kind of flush elimination program, a dietary elimination program. That's one that I might recommend for people who wanted to actively do that.
Yep, very good company.
And fasting. Some people fast extensively for days and weeks, but the challenge there is you're going to eliminate a lot of stuff, including a lot of your own muscle. And at the end of the fast, you've got a lot of rebuilding to do. Yes, you'll be cleaned out, but you'll be weak as a kitten. So that's got to be treated with care. So as much as we talk about the intestines, we have to love them too.
Guys, what can you talk about the process of colon hydrotherapy or coffee enemas and all that kind of stuff that seems to come in and out of fashion? What's the place for that in proper detoxification?
You probably know more about that than I do, Ron, don't you?
I've got a son-in-law right now who's doing coffee enemas, and that's pretty old technology. It's good technology still. I've done it myself in the past, and it has been beneficial. And I think it's done. There's a lot of people who do colon therapy, but I think what happens for the large part, those people are just treating a condition, and they're not doing what we're trying to do, is get down to the root of why you got the problem in the first place. Not that that's bad, because if there's toxins building up there and you've got to eliminate, or it's going to kill you. So that's very, very important. But coffee enemas, I think they're really, really a good thing to do. Make sure the coffee's cooled off before you start to do it, because that colon is very sensitive. But
and no cream or Splenda.
And don't use decaf either. Use full strength.
Right.
And I would be using an organic coffee, by the way, too, because otherwise, yeah. And decaf is not good either, because the process of decaffeination of coffee, unless it's water decaffeinated. They're using chemicals to decaffeinate coffee. So you got to really, dig into a little bit more of what you're doing before you just kind of read something and kind of go do it.
So
I think the colon therapists have some good things, because you do, the job of the colon is to absorb water from the fecal contents. And if they've been in there too long, what happens is you absorb way too much water. The material gets very hard and almost impossible to pass. And it needs to be softened. It needs to be passed, because it'll pack around the wall of the colon. And that stuff's highly toxic. So then you're absorbing toxics from the colon. So, I mean, bowel movements are a good thing. A friend who's a Chinese healer has an expression about bowel movements where she talks about eating, and she says bear comes into the cage, or into the cave rather, bear goes out of the cage. So when you eat, you should feel an urge to have a bowel movement not long after. And that's a system that's clearing. And of course, if you have certain markers in your diet, I go to Cheech and Chong and the corn thing, but there are certain things, if you look back in the toilet, you can see what your transit time is. And your transit time should be fairly brief. I don't know what you think it is, but it's something like 12, 14 hours, something like that. Stuff should be passing through.
Exactly. And what I would do too, you can go to the health food store and you get some activated charcoal. If you want to find out what your bowel transit time is, take some, I think about 8 to 10 capsules with a meal, and then mark that time down, and you'll see the charcoal show up, hopefully, hopefully sooner than later. But we've gone 3 and 4 days where people saying, I'm not seeing anything yet. So their transit time is real slow. Going back to what you just said, Ken, about the water in the colon. Our colon is about 2 feet up on your right-hand side, 2 feet across the transverse colon, and then the descending is another 2 feet. So about 6 feet on an average guy, gal, average height and all that adult. So in that upward colon from the ileocecal valve, where your small intestine, when everything is absorbed, it's going to be absorbed for the most part, is done. There's a little valve at the bottom there, right by the appendix. It opens up and it goes into the garbage can. And the consistency of it is about like applesauce. So there's a lot of liquid in there. About 75% of that moisture, that water, gets squeezed out through a process called peristalsis. If you looked at a colon, it's kind of like an inchworm. When you watch a worm go across, there's all these segments. Well, that peristalsis is working good when you're young and you're small and you haven't eaten all this terrible food and wound up with a lot of constipation because you're eating the paper mache, the wheat and the dairy and all the things that are causing this mucus to dry up. And if you're not drinking enough water, it's going to line the colon walls, and that peristalsis is gone. So you're not eliminating. So, and then another 10 to 15% goes out across the transverse colon. And then it's, by the time you get into the descending colon, it's pretty firm. So, in fact, one guy comes to my mind that I work with, and he says, Ron, I don't know how to say it on this call, but he says, I need to basically go in there with a spoon to dig it out. It's that hard. Yeah. And he died at a fairly young age because he was so impacted. In fact, I remember when I was at Dr. Jensen's ranch, they had a woman, when they did an autopsy, they removed her colon. It weighed 90 pounds. Think about that.
Yep, horrible. And then another factor that probably a lot of people don't realize and underestimate is the role of stress. When you are stressed, you activate something called the sympathetic part of the autonomic nervous system. And when you activate that, you cease to digest, your motility in the colon and stomach stops. The idea is that if you've got a lion chasing you, you don't need to digest dinner, you need to run. So it shifts all the energy to your muscles and away from your internal organs, away from your immune system. And for people who are under chronic stress, they do not digest their food well, and it starts at the stomach. We need to be relaxed in order to secrete the mucus that coats the stomach. And when we're stressed, we don't secrete enough of that mucus, and then the acid begins to eat the stomach, and then somebody gives you something for the acid to cut out the acid, and then you don't absorb your minerals because you need acid to chelate the minerals, and it goes on and on and on. And really, it's primarily a stress thing.
You know, it's really interesting when you're talking about that. It reminds me of reading an article by Dr. Jonathan Wright, who's up in your neck of the woods there, just down in Tacoma, Washington. Brilliant, brilliant medical doctor, and I've heard him speak live quite a few times at National Health Federation conventions in Chicago years ago. But he wrote a paper on antacids, and a lot of people use antacids today. And so why are we using antacids? Well, number one, a lot of people are told by their medical doctor to stop eating salt. Salt's bad for you. Well, the stomach is a sodium organ. Now, if you're not getting sodium, I don't mean table salt, I mean sodium in the diet, you're not going to be able to produce the hydrochloric acid that you need to break down your starches and proteins that allow us to digest our foods, to get the nutrients that are supposedly in the foods to be able to sustain life. So we're eliminating the salt. We're taking in acids because now we got too much acid in there. So we have acid reflux, and it's because we don't have enough stomach acid that we have this problem. Not too much, not enough. So we got to go back to the why. Always go back to the why. Why am I not digesting? Do I have good sodium in the diet? I take 1/8 of a teaspoon of pink Himalayan salt with about at least 6-8 glasses of 15 ounces of warm water every day. So I'm getting a good, oh, your blood pressure is going to be high, you're eating eggs, your cholesterol is going to be high. I mean, we are in tip-top shape, but it's not the medical model. And we've got to get away from that, and we've got to go, how does the body function? And you just got to pick up a book yourself. You can listen to Ken, you can listen to John, you can listen to me, you can listen to Dr. Rajan or anybody else out there. You've got to learn it for yourself, and you got to make it personal. Because if you don't, and you're just taking supplements, that's a good thing sometimes. And if you got a company like Galen, it's a great thing. But there's a lot of companies out there that are really putting out some terrible supplements that are causing a lot of the toxic burdens we're talking about.
Yeah, yeah. And it's funny, I'm listening to you and I'm thinking how we're coming full circle. We talk about toxins and digestion, and we can just go round and round just like that intestine. Somebody said that humans are just a tube with teeth on one end and a sphincter on the other end. And it's true. I mean, that is our outside in. We really depend on that. And again, you get into the flora, you get the wrong flora growing. Say you've had a bout of antibiotics, you get the wrong flora growing in there, you get an overgrowth of, oh, come on, brain. I'm trying to think of the one.
E. coli?
Anyway, there's, it'll come to me. Anyway, a lot of these ones put out serious toxins, the bad bacteria. There's ones called cadaverine and gases and things like that, and that's that foul pickled egg gas that people get. And so the wrong bacteria in there are going to poison you as well. So, and that's where the role of probiotics comes in, or eating fermented vegetables, things like that, to improve your digestive flora and keep yourself from becoming toxic from the inside out.
It's all.
You guys, this has been a fantastic discussion, and as everybody on the call will know, you could probably do another 3 or 4 sessions without any problems if we allowed you to. We could get into heavy metal detox, the chelation, whether it's intravenous or oral. We could get into many other topics as well. But for the next couple of minutes, if we could just open it up to the folks on the call and see if they have some specific questions for the two of you right now, let's do that. So if you have a question, just please unmute yourself and go ahead and ask.
Jackie has a good question in the chat.
I saw that. So Jackie's question was, is it a natural progression with age if unattended the intolerance to foods? Would this be a topic to mention when explaining emulin and climax? Who wants to handle that?
Well, I'll say one thing to that is that as we age, we tend to produce less stomach acid. And there's a series of things that happen. In order to absorb your food, there's two things that cause acid secretion. One is distension of the stomach. The other is the presence of protein. If either of those are inadequate or both of those are inadequate, you don't produce enough acid. And seniors produce less and less. Now, as the stomach contents pass into the colon, they are given a squirt of bile, which emulsifies the oil. And then as they go in, or I meant small intestine. And then as they go along in the small intestine, pancreatic enzymes are secreted to neutralize the acid. Now, if you don't have much acid, you're not going to secrete much pancreatic enzyme, and the digestion begins to go off. And I often ask people, it sounds embarrassing, but I'll ask people what their gas smells like. It should be, we pass, I think, 2 liters a day, and it should be somewhat neutral. If it's pickled eggs, your digestion is, protein digestion's off. If it's sweet and sticky smelling gas, your carbohydrate digestion's off. Ron, have you got anything?
Yeah, you nailed that right on the target there. I shouldn't tell stories out of school, but yeah, it can be bad.
I want to pipe in again on another topic that for a while I was very highly involved in. The whole issue of the impaction of the colon. You might know the story of Elvis Presley. When he died, that's what, on his autopsy, there was about a 57-pound colon from all the junk food and all the medications that he'd been put under. So that was one of the things. But the gentleman who invented the colonoscopy is a guy in Japan by the name of Hiromi Shinya. And this is about 40 or 50 years ago when it was first done. He has become a huge proponent for the last 30 or 40 years of drinking lots of 9.5 pH alkaline water. He will not do a colonoscopy or a procedure on a colon on a person unless they've been drinking that for at least a month. He takes pictures pre and post, and it's dramatic, the changes that this kind of water does, not only to everything in that whole pipe, as you say, Ron, or Ken, but also there was a discussion of the reflux. I've had several patients when I was marketing that product who'd been on medication for acid reflux for years. From the very first 2 or 3 glasses of this alkaline water, they have never had to use any medications. They've never had any kind of issues with acid reflux. So, the alkalinity, we need to be at roughly 7.2, 7.3 in our milieu, in our, interstitial milieu. Most of the things that we drink, most of the things we eat produce acidity in the body. And, there was a Nobel Prize winner, I forget the man's name, a German scientist, who showed that cancer cannot exist in an alkaline environment, but thrives in an acidic one. So alkalinity is a very important topic. The 2 gentlemen on the call described the filter that they use. I also recommend this Enagic product for the alkaline water. Any other questions?
I have one. In terms of us taking the Climax, Dr. Regan, in one of his early talks, January, once the Climax had come out, was saying, don't be surprised when your poo goes green. Yep. It's not the actual color of the drink, that's bile. Could you just explain what that process is? And he was saying sort of after 3 weeks, the poo should go back to being an okay color. Or so.
I'll jump in if you want with what I know. I don't know a lot about that. I know that's happened to me. The main component that makes your normal feces brown is bilirubin, which is a byproduct of recycling red blood cells. And that cyanobacteria is bluer than blue, so it's got pigment in it, and that's going to go right through you. So I'm not, and people have that with beets as well, which in fact, and Ron, we should have talked about that. That is a great detoxifier as well.
Exactly.
It's not a concern by any stretch.
No, I would agree with that 100%.
Unless you're taken to the emergency and they ask you to give them a sample and they don't know that you're taking the product, then you'll have some explaining to do.
Just tell them you're from Mars.
That might be the final way of getting through to your medical doctor.
You know, I want to go back to what Jackie's question was too, a little bit about aging and how that all happens. And one of the things that we know when we study how the body functions is that one of the last things that our bodies fail to digest is protein, because protein is made out of amino acids, and those are the building blocks of life. So if you got the protein and you're breaking that down fine, you're going to have a good, long, productive life. But because we're taking these antacids, because we're not getting the salt that we need, or we happen to be a type A blood type types, I've found from a lot of research, do not produce the hydrochloric acid in the stomach that's needed for the proper breakdown of proteins and starches. So all of those things are going against me. And if that's happening, and if you're in that stage of life when you think things aren't, if you're seeing corn is one of those good indicators too, whether you're digesting a lot. I can eat sweet corn organic in the summer, never see it in my stools whatsoever, because I've got enough hydrochloric acid to break that down properly. So if you're a type A blood type, or you're on some medications that may, like an antacid, because you're having this acid reflux, it's really not because you have too much stomach acid, it's because you have too little. So you got to go back to get the sodium, good source of sodium in there to have that happening. Chew your food good, because you're producing enzymes in the mouth already. That's starting before I eat. And one of the things that my dad was very strict on, 8 o'clock in the morning, 7:30 in the morning, whatever it was when we were back in school, breakfast, lunch, noon, dinner time, 6. So when you do that consistently, your body is already preparing you for what is coming. So your stomach knows that, okay, it's about another 4 hours, Ron's going to be eating again. I better start getting some enzymes prepared to break down what he's going to eat. Now, if I skip a meal or two, the body's going to say, wow, this is stupid. Why am I going through all this work to do that? He's not serious about eating. So the body is always in this self-preservation. It's not going to do what it doesn't have to do. So what we need to do is eat consistently. That's an important thing. One of the things I've learned a long time ago from a dear, dear doctor, and it helped me in my digestive system, which was really, really weak and poor, is eat raw things first. Because your stomach is not a great big old mix master or a blender. You want to layer food. And I do this, and I'll tell you, you'll never be stuffed and filled again. I eat my raw foods first. Then I eat my cooked foods second. I'll eat my breads or starches if I'm going to do that, or a potato third. And then I'll eat my protein last. Because I'm layering it in my stomach in terms of what's going to be broken down in the system first. So if I put that steak in first, and then I have, let's say some fruit afterwards, that fruit's going to digest like in 20 minutes. That steak's going to take maybe 2 hours. So the fruit's digested, and it's wanting to go through. But it's producing gas. It's fermenting in the stomach. So you get the bloated feeling. So layering food, I think, is one of the best advice I've ever had when it comes to eating properly. Try it. You'll like it.
That sounds fascinating. I would love to know the title for that book, or whoever it was that explained that to you, because that's the first time I've heard that explained that way.
Well, it wasn't a book. It was the doctor who trained me, Dr. Robert Preston.
Okay.
He was a naturopath chiropractor.
Okay.
Yep.
Cool. So Debbie asked, she had a couple of things to the mix here. She said, obviously probiotics, which Dr. Ken already discussed, but then she introduced one of her, expertise is the whole issue of meridians. And ever since I've known her, she's been after me about meridians, and I never understand how they work or what they do, but she does some amazing things with that. Do you guys have some insight on that?
A little bit. So, I mean, that's an acupuncture thing. It's a completely different energy system than the nervous system. It's parallel. She would be able to tell me there's hundreds of acupuncture points over the body that correlate with various organs, various functions. When I refer to a Chinese medicine practitioner and somebody says, well, what did they do? It's a little difficult to describe because they're going to say that you're hot or cold or wet or dry, and their whole mode of diagnosis is different, effective. And then they'll deal with acupuncture, acupressure, and cupping, things like that. I've been treated that way, but I can't claim to be an expert at all on it.
Okay.
I'm not either.
And Charlene and Debbie also added the whole issue of lemon water daily, and then Debbie also added something about peppermint oil in a cup of hot water as a great liver cleanse. What are your thoughts on lemon water and peppermint oil water?
Well, I can tell you my day starts out with half a squeezed lemon in 15 ounces of warm water and a quarter teaspoon of cayenne pepper. Mix that all together. After I've held on my tongue about 1/8 of a teaspoon of pink Himalayan salt for about 30 seconds. Let that kind of absorb, and then I chug that 15 ounces of warm, and it's warm enough where it's almost too hot, but with fresh squeezed lemons. And every day starts out that way with a cayenne pepper. And boy, I'll tell you, if there's any chance you think you're having a heart attack, do that. Because it opens up capillaries, it opens up systems. And for some of us in this family, it'll open up the bowels too. So, and it's not very long afterwards that things start to really move and get rid of a lot of waste material that we've stored overnight. Because your body is sloughing off dead cells. Ken talked about this just a minute ago. You know, the reason for our brown stools is red blood cells dying off. In fact, every 3 months, we've got completely new red blood cells in our body. Think about that. It's pretty cool. So we need to flush, in dead skin, we need to flush that all out.
Yeah.
My only comment with regard to the lemon juice, and it is good, and I wish I know there's something called a hydrogen shift. Debbie, you may know better about that, where acidic things will cause more of an alkaline system. The one thing that I would recommend is after taking lemon juice to swish your mouth out with water, pure water, because it is somewhat acidic and a little hard on the dental enamel.
Oh, okay. Interesting.
Yeah, it can be, although I've heard too, Ken, and maybe you guys can correct me if I'm wrong, but when we eat acidic foods like oranges and lemons, in the body, they become alkaline.
Yes. Yeah.
So if they're ripe.
Yeah. That's why
we live up north, not where you get them fresh off the tree ripe. They come up here green as grass, and then they finally turn yellow after a while.
Yeah, yeah.
Hey, guys, it's really getting close to the hour. We've had some very complimentary comments on the chat line about the information that you're purveying tonight, and people are really appreciative of it. Debbie has also told everybody that you can find the recordings of all these, not only on the various Facebook group pages as we normally post, but also in a shareable form on her YouTube channel, which is Everything Galen, or everything stem cell and carbohydrate management. So look for Debbie's channel, Everything Stem Cell and Carbohydrate Management, and you'll get all of these calls archived there as well. Any last?
Thank you, Debbie.
So, hey guys, so tomorrow in Vancouver, last call of anybody who hasn't got tickets yet. I think they still have tickets for an evening with Dr. Scolio. I know that the Calgary event on Saturday is sold out. There will be a call with Dr. Scolio coming up soon that will be shareable. But anyway, for next week, you guys talk amongst yourself and come up with some topic ideas.
Is this gentleman that was going to talk about diabetes next week?
Yes. Yeah, he's going to be on next week.
Okay, great.
Yeah.
So we have.
And the following week, I was wondering if we should cover stress.
Okay, you're on.
I don't know if that's okay with you, Ron.
I'd get stressed out about it, but go ahead.
John,
Yes, dear.
John, could I
Yeah.
just ask the doctors one thing? I've had a few people that I've talked to, and they are telling me that they are taking a cleanse with borax in water, helping alleviate inflammation, and they swear by it.
Okay. Guys, I don't know about that.
I don't know. I'd be a little suspicious right off the hop. Borax is mined, and there may be some heavy metal involved and some other things with it. There may be a food-grade borax.
If you get baking soda, food-grade baking soda, then you're okay.
Yeah, no, this is borax, like from the laundry aisle, mixed with water, and they say it's doing wonders for them, for their knees, etc.
Okay. All
I'd be
right.
cautionary on that.
Yeah.
I would think amulin would be a better way to go.
Yes.
Well, yeah, exactly. That's what I'm trying to do. But of course, borax is a lot cheaper, so that's the way they're going. So,
Okay.
you
Well,
know, if it's
That's like,
working for them,
It's like people spraying WD-40 on their joints to lubricate them.
yeah. Thanks. No, I just thought I'd throw it out there because I have heard that from a few people, and I thought, wow, this is kind of crazy.
okay. Thank you very much, everybody, for your contributions. Ken and Ron, thank you again for what you do. And all of you that are on the call, thanks for joining us again tonight. I'm going to stop the recording, but you can